This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather and Connie Chung.
Good evening. For the first time in the Bosnian Civil War, U.S. warplanes opened fire today.
They shot down 4 Serbian planes in the no-fly zone, which was established by NATO more than a year ago. The combat was the first in the history of NATO, and the Allies say it shows they mean business in Bosnia. Pentagon correspondent Jim Stewart begins our coverage.
Clear to fire.
Cleared to engage. Words that authorize NATO pilots to open fire early today for the first time in the Balkan War. 7 minutes later, 4 Bosnian Serb jets were shot down by U.S. F-16s for flying in a no-fly zone.
These were attack aircraft violating the no-fly zone, and he would have engaged them because they were not obeying the warnings and they were not leaving.
The action took place over Muslim-held territory near Banja Luka, northwest of the Bosnian capital of Sarajevo. The flights were made by Serbian jet aircraft, which were observed making bombing runs on a Muslim industrial complex. Flying under NATO command, the lead pilot of 4 patrolling U.S. fighters warned the Serb aircraft to land or else.
Violations of the no-fly zone, like we saw today, will simply not be tolerated, and if we can engage, we will engage.
NATO aircraft are also on call to launch airstrikes for UN ground forces in Bosnia if they come under attack, but that kind of action would require a direct request for help, something UN commanders have been loath to do for fear of endangering their own men. NATO commanders say they're not sure whose resolve was tested more today.
If it was a test, I think we passed the quiz. I hope that there is also a lesson learned.
A lesson that could cut both ways. Having used force in Bosnia for the first time, the question for NATO now is whether it will be forced to do so again. Jim Stewart, CBS News, the Pentagon.
On the ground in Bosnia, the NATO attack raised concerns that the Serbs might strike back and rekindle in full the ethnic war. But it also raised hopes that Western power can be used to impose peace. CBS News war correspondent Barry Peterson spent 2 weeks in Sarajevo and reports tonight from the Croatian capital of Zagreb.
If the Serbs were intimidated by NATO's punch in the nose, they didn't show it immediately, still shelling the northern city of Tuzla. Nor did they back down in Sarajevo, where the UN commander kept negotiating to open a downtown bridge to Serb-controlled areas. Still, he remains upbeat.
And I don't believe that it would have the slightest effect on what we're doing here, which of course is feeding 2.7 million people.
8 convoys across Bosnia went nowhere, fear of reprisals, and the Sarajevo airlift was shut down for the same reason. The leader of Bosnia's Serbs was on the move, going ahead with a trip to Moscow, the Serbs' ethnic and religious allies.
We are concerned that America is trying to make a new Yugoslavia without Serbs.
And in Mostar, as besieged as Sarajevo ever was, the UN Special Envoy was still talking peace about extending the successful Sarajevo ceasefire across Bosnia.
We should move to other cities, and on the top of the list is Mostar.
The sense here is that the fledgling peace process has not been shattered. Indeed, the mood among UN officials is quite the opposite. Now that the Serbs have called NATO's bluff and lost, the Serbs may be much more willing to talk than fight. Barry Peterson, CBS News, Zagreb.
It was about 1 o'clock this morning in Washington when the planes were shot down. However, White House aides said President Clinton was not awakened because it was all over quickly and no U.S. troops were in danger. White House correspondent Rita Braver has more on that part of the story.
White House aides said the president learned of the shoot-down when he awoke about 6 this morning. The strategy here: underscore the fact that though U.S. planes were deployed, it was a NATO mission. Make it clear NATO means business, but don't incite the Serbs.
There were 2 warnings. Every attempt was made, as to the best of our information, to avoid this encounter.
And visiting British Prime Minister John Major meeting with Vice President